Week 5 of the 2021 college football season is now in the books, and today, as we head into Week 6, I'll be giving you guys my updated rankings for this week of the 2021 college football season. And looking back at Week 5, it was another crazy week of college football. We saw several big upsets, and we're starting to see which teams are the main college football playoff contenders of this 2021 season. But I mean, it has been an upset-filled season without a doubt so far. I mean, we've seen some major surprises in the past 5 weeks. And I saw a stat. Apparently, this is the most upset-filled season among AP Top 25 teams than we've seen in the past decade. So we're bound for a very exciting October and November here, and Week 5 was no exception to that. I mean, we saw several, once again, big matchups and some surprises as well. But that being said, let's go ahead and start looking at Week 6 here today. And I'll be giving you guys my top 25 for this week here today, starting out with 1 through 7. Georgia is the new number 1 team. They have passed up Alabama, and Georgia, the Bulldogs, beat Arkansas 37-0 this past weekend. And I mean, that was an outstanding win. I mean, Arkansas, that is a talented football team. I mean, many people are saying, oh, Arkansas was overrated from the start. They shouldn't have been ranked in the top 10. They should have been. I mean, Arkansas had them at number 7 last week, and rightfully so. They beat Texas A&M and Texas prior to playing Georgia, but Georgia, they just completely ran over the Razorbacks. Arkansas mentally was not ready for that game. Physically, they're a very, very talented football team, especially on the defensive side of things, but mentally, Arkansas was not ready to go. I mean, they had 2 false starts on their first drive, and that first drive went back like 12 yards, and you could just tell that, I mean, they were playing in a very tough environment, and Arkansas just could not handle it. So that was definitely taken into account for my Week 6 rankings here, but Georgia, they made that win look easy. I mean, they made Arkansas look like one of the worst teams in the SEC when really Arkansas is still pretty talented. But yeah, Georgia won at 37-0, and without a doubt, I mean, Bulldogs are my number 1 team this week. I mean, for me right now, you got Georgia and Alabama. Those are your top 2 teams, and then you've got a huge gap until number 3, which is Iowa. I mean, Georgia and Alabama are clearly the top 2 teams in the nation right now. Alabama also had a big win yesterday over Ole Miss, 42-21. Also very impressive win without a doubt. You may say, oh, Alabama looked just as good against an Ole Miss team, but I mean, Georgia right now, just looking at their schedule, I got to go with Georgia at number 1 right now. And of course, I mean, that can change over the next few weeks. But it's going to be very fun seeing Georgia and Alabama in the SEC championship game, because we'll be able to see which team is truly the best team in the nation. But until then, we got to keep guessing whether Georgia or Alabama is the number 1 team in the nation. But yeah, both teams are 5-0 between Georgia and Bama. And once again, Alabama had that huge win over Ole Miss, 42-21 this past weekend. Iowa jumps up to number 3 after their win over Maryland, 51-14. Maryland is also a talented football team. Like, their quarterback, Tagovailoa, he had, I think, 4 picks, if I'm right. I mean, he just did not play very well against Iowa. But then again, the Hawkeyes' defense is outstanding. I mean, Iowa's offense, that's the thing, is that Iowa's defense from the start of the season has been outstanding. Like, their defense is, I would almost argue, I mean, it's tough to say that their defense is better than Georgia or Alabama's, but without a doubt, I mean, Iowa has a top 3 defense in the nation. Offensively, at the start of the season especially, they were not very good. I mean, Spencer Petras is, I wouldn't say a top 15 quarterback, but Iowa's defense, I mean, it's been great. And then Iowa's offense has also been improving. Like the past couple of weeks, well, last week in general over Maryland, I mean, their offense really played very well. I mean, Spencer Petras played great. Goodson played great. I mean, this offense is definitely improving right now. And that's the scary thing about Iowa, is their defense is already great, but their offense, I mean, is improving. I mean, their offense is on the rise right now. So Iowa, number 3 right now for me, they're 5-0. Penn State is number 4. They shut out Indiana 24-0, and that's going to be a fun game next week. Iowa and Penn State in Iowa City, 3 versus number 4. I mean, that's going to be quite a matchup, because that will kind of show us which is the big contender in the Big Ten right now for the college football playoff. Which Iowa, it's a good thing they have it at home. Iowa's got a pretty good home field advantage, but Penn State, they need to come ready to play against a very brutal Iowa defense. So Penn State, they also had a great win, shutout over Indiana, and they're also undefeated at 5-0. Cincinnati's number 5. Cincinnati will be in the top 4 next week, granted that Georgia and Alabama both win their games, because you'll have Iowa or Penn State at number 3, and then Cincinnati will be up to number 4. So Cincinnati is on standby to be in the top 4. They beat Notre Dame 24-13. and they're moving up one after last week. And this is the Bearcats. I mean, they've got a lot to lose right now. I mean, Cincinnati, even if you take a loss in the remainder of your schedule, I mean, you don't really have a very big resume builder in the rest of your schedule other than the American Athletic Championship game. So Cincinnati, they got to really play well in their next throughout the rest of the regular season, because I mean that's what's going to show the College Football Playoff Committee that you should be in the top 4. But Bearcats, they will be top 4 for week 7. Granted, they also win next week. So, but Bearcats, they looked excellent against Notre Dame. Fighting Irish are a very talented football team, and Cincinnati, I mean, Ritter, that team is for real. And I think this could be the season that we see a group of 5 team in the playoff. I mean, it is extremely possible considering how many upsets we've seen so far in this season, but also, I mean, Cincinnati's played outstanding. So there's a lot of pressure on them right now without a doubt, but I think Cincinnati is capable of definitely being the top 4 come December. Oklahoma's number 6. They beat Kansas State 37-31. Kansas State has been a team that's given them trouble in the past few years, but Oklahoma, solid win. They're moving up 2 positions, and they're 5-0. I mean, Sooners are still a questionable team just because of the amount of close wins that they've had, but I like Oklahoma. That is still a talented football team that I think some people are sleeping on just because they've had a lot of close games, but I mean, a win's a win. And so, yeah, Oklahoma's still in my top 6. Michigan jumps up 6 positions after their blowout win at Wisconsin, 38-17. Wisconsin is still a talented team, even though their quarterback is pretty terrible, which, I mean, once again, definitely give my condolences to Graham Mertz after his injury. But I mean, Wisconsin, that team is a mess right now, especially offensively. I mean, it's not looking too good for them. But Michigan, solid win, 38-17. They're undefeated and in the top 7. So Michigan, they are ranked above Ohio State, just to note there, which Ohio State is our number 8 this week. They blew out Rutgers 52-13. Only reason why Michigan is ranked above Ohio State right now is because Ohio State does have a loss on their record right now. I mean, it'll be fun to see Michigan and Ohio State play each other in a couple of months, or in a few weeks. It'll be at the end of November, because I mean, you'll have 2 probably top 10, top 15 teams in that matchup. But yeah, Ohio State, solid win over Rutgers, probably one of the better wins of the season we've seen out of them so far. Michigan State beat Western Kentucky 48-31. I mean, you let 31 points to Western Kentucky. That's my only concern about the Spartans right now, but they're undefeated at 5-0. And I do have them below Ohio State because they allowed 31 points to Western Kentucky. So they're undefeated like Michigan, but Michigan State just has not looked quite as good resume-wise as Michigan. Oregon drops down 7 positions after their terrible loss to Stanford. I mean, you cannot lose to Stanford. I mean, Oregon, this is a team that basically had a guaranteed spot in the top 4. I mean, if they can just win out in the Pac-12, which is not a terribly hard task for this football team considering their strength of schedule. I mean, UCLA down the road could be a tough one, but yeah, Oregon, that is a brutal loss. They're 4-1, and they're dropping down to number 10 for me. Oklahoma State is number 11. They beat Baylor, and Oklahoma State has improved drastically over the course of the season so far. I've got them at number 11 and jumping up 6 positions after last week. They're 5-0. BYU's number 12 for me. They beat Utah State by 2 touchdowns, so kind of a closer game than expected there, but overall, once again, win's a win. They're 5-0. And they're jumping up 3 positions after that win to number 12. Notre Dame lost to Cincinnati 13-24, but I mean, Notre Dame, that is still a talented team. I'm only dropping them down 2 positions because, I mean, it was a close game overall, and I still believe in Notre Dame that they're a talented team. Auburn beat LSU on the road 24-19. Solid win for the Tigers, or for Auburn at least. LSU, they're just a mess right now. That is a team that, I mean, LSU, I figured LSU would actually be a pretty good team this season, but so far, I mean, they've taken a couple of bad losses, and LSU's a mess right now. That is something that Orgeron really needs to fix up, or else there's going to be some questions about him in the future. But Auburn, good win for them. They won it by 5, and they're 4-1. Moving on to 15 through 21, Kentucky, watch out for that team. I considered putting them in my rankings last week. I ended up not, just because Kentucky's first 4 games, they had some questionably close games, but after their win against Florida, I mean, Kentucky has shown, like, this is a team that can win some solid football games, and yeah, so without a doubt, I've got much more confidence in Kentucky this week, obviously, than I did before week 5, and Kentucky is undefeated at 5-0, and I think they're worthy of a top 15 ranking right now. Arkansas is number 16. I dropped them down 9 positions after their loss to Georgia. They didn't even score a single point in that game. And Arkansas, I mean, I love this team after their Texas A&M win. I mean, they looked great in that Texas A&M game. But against Georgia, the thing is about Arkansas, this team was mentally not ready to go. And that's the thing. If you're going to be a college football playoff team, you got to be mentally stable as a football team. Like, I mean, if you're looking at Alabama and Georgia, both of those teams are extremely confident in when they're playing and they don't make stupid mistakes. For Arkansas, they had however many false starts yesterday. They had 2 on their first drive. And that entire first quarter, I don't even think they hardly gained a yard. Well, actually, they did have a pretty good drive, I think, at the beginning of the second quarter, if I'm right. But the entire first part of that game, Arkansas just could not even get a first down. So Arkansas mentally was not ready to go in that game. I mean, they really got to fix that up if they're going to be a good football team, which, I mean, they are a good football team. I think they're very talented, but, I mean, you can be a physical football team, but you also got to have mental stability as well, which they did not have in Georgia. I mean, it's a brutal environment to play in without a doubt. I mean, Georgia was a fired up place for a noon kickoff, but yeah, for Arkansas, I've got to be better than that if you'll be a top 10 team. But then you got Ole Miss at number 17. They lost to Alabama by 3 touchdowns, 21-42. They're dropping down 5 positions after that loss. Not a terrible loss. I mean, they kept it close at first, but I mean, in the end, it was still a blowout loss. Coastal Carolina beat Louisiana Monroe 59-6, which the score looks great, but Louisiana Monroe is a pretty terrible team, so I'm just keeping Coastal Carolina at 18 for now. Florida's moving down 10 positions after their loss against Kentucky. That is Florida's second loss on the season. I'm still keeping them in the top 20, mainly because if you look at Texas, Arizona State, I do think Florida, if they were matched up against Texas or Arizona State or any team below them, I think Florida would win 9 times out of 10. So I am keeping Florida in the top 20 just because I like the talent on that team. But, I mean, 2 losses is kind of questionable. Texas beat TCU 32-27. They're not looking too bad. Texas is in the top 20 now, and they're entering back in the rankings this week. Arizona State beat UCLA 42-23. Solid win for the Sun Devils. Arizona State's been a team that I think has been a big dark horse in the Pac-12. I mean, this entire offseason, I really like this Arizona State team, and quite possibly, I mean, Arizona State could be the best team in the Pac-12. I mean, Oregon, they're a talented team as well, but I mean, Arizona State is still very talented as well. I mean, if you're a Pac-12 fan, don't sleep on Arizona State. I mean, that team could quite possibly be your Pac-12 champion this year. Of course, if they can get past Oregon later on. But Arizona State, I like that team quite a bit. On to 22 through 25, Wake Forest comes in at 22. They beat Louisville by 3, 37-34. I mean, they're 5-0. They're probably the best team in the ACC, which is pretty embarrassing for the conference right now. I mean, Wake Forest, I think in the people, they're in the top 20, if I'm right. I'm not going to raise them after that 3-point win over Louisville. I mean, that's not a very good win. I mean, it's a 3-point win, and I mean, you scored 37 points, but to Louisville, not the best win. I'm going to keep Wake Forest at 22 for now. NC State beat Louisiana Tech by a touchdown, 34-27. They're 4-1, and I'm also keeping them at 23. Texas A&M is number 24 for me. Some of you guys may question why Texas A&M is number 24 and why they're not dropped out of the rankings. Well, if you put Texas A&M against SMU or Oregon State or San Diego State, 3 of my top teams in the first 5 out, I think Texas A&M would win 9 times out of 10, most likely against all of those opponents. That's kind of what's taken into account with my rankings. Is I think Texas A&M, I mean, they lost again this past weekend to Mississippi State this time, 26-22, but I still think Texas A&M has got enough talent. I mean, they've got much more talented players to the point where I think that they would beat, say, SMU or Oregon State in the end. So I think Aggies are still worthy of a top 25 ranking, but if they lose again, they should be knocked out of the top 25 because, I mean, 3 losses when you're through October, I don't really think that's a reasonable place to put them in the top 25. But Clemson, they're number 25. I'm keeping them in my top 25 as well, just because, once again, if you put Clemson against SMU or any of those teams, I would say Clemson would win most of the time. So, I mean, they beat, Clemson this past weekend had a win over Boston College, 19-13. Not a bad win. I mean, it was awfully close. Boston College was very close to winning that game. And Boston College very easily could have pulled off an upset there. And what is up with Clemson is my question, too. I mean, that Tiger team, you can tell they're very inexperienced. I mean, Uiagalelei, he's a talented quarterback, but he just has not played up to the level, obviously, of Trevor Lawrence. And I think Trevor Lawrence had a big part, obviously, in leading Clemson to so much success over the past few years. But I mean, he's now gone, and Clemson is a new football team without him, without a doubt. I mean, they also lost a lot of talent after 2020. I mean, this was a pretty experienced team last season, and this year, I mean, the inexperience is definitely showing so far in this 2021 season, but they're 3-2 after their win over Boston College. So, yeah, their first 5 out, though, SMU's number 26. They're pretty talented. I wouldn't really be opposed to putting them in the top 25, but I don't really want to put them over the Aggies or Clemson quite yet. Oregon State is 27. They're looking pretty good. They're 4-1. San Diego State's number 28. They're still undefeated. Virginia Tech is 29, and then Baylor is 30 after their loss to Oklahoma State. So Baylor still in the first 5 out. Dropped out, UCLA was 19 last week. Baylor was 21, and Maryland was 25. So that being said, that's going to wrap it up for me today for my Week 6 rankings. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on these rankings, and if you enjoyed the video, slap a like on it. Subscribe as well if you're not already yet, as it does help out the channel, and I'd really appreciate that. But once again, appreciate you guys all watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys later.